I of England. King James I is famous for these three things: popery, Puritans, and witches. He is also very well known as one of the first openly gay monarchs in history. But before he was dubbed as the pioneer of homosexuality among the royalties, there are more interesting facts about the Scottish king. Not to mention how his intention to unite England and Scotland is just one of many intriguing ambitions he has, which successfully earned him the moniker, the wisest fool in Christendom. Not to mention the ad hominem attacks from his enemies. Did you know that King James I of England was gay? Well, that's what history book. Did you know that King James I of England was gay? Well, that's what history books would tell us. However, a lot of people... So, was the king really gay? Let's find out. Also very well known as one of the first openly gay monarchs in history. But before he was dubbed as the pioneer of homosexuality among the royalties, there are more interesting facts about the Scottish king. Not to mention how his intention to unite England and Scotland is just one of many intriguing ambitions he has, which successfully earned him the moniker, the wisest fool in Christendom. Not to mention the ad hominem attacks from his enemies, such as Sir Anthony Weldon, who referred to James as a swearing, slobbering idiot with a tongue too large for his mouth, forever fiddling with his codpiece. Such criticisms detract from the story of one of Britain's most fascinating and colorful monarchs. Maybe this is what you get if your mother, the Queen, is involved with the murder of your father. Going back, James's reign began during religious intolerance and change. Since the early 16th century, no Scottish king has risen to the throne as an adult. They have all been children aged 2 or younger, but at the end of the day, James was still crowned king and became the first ever monarch who successfully wore all 4 crowns of the United Kingdoms. However, his name was also mentioned for another thing. Historians believe that the king was actually gay and gave out favors to his favorite male courtiers. As expected, this triggered a lot of people in the kingdom, but they brushed it off as nothing but mere friendship, or so they thought. Forbidden friendship. And yet, I cannot content myself without sending you this billet, praying God that I may have a joyful and comfortable meeting with you, and that we may make at this Christenmass a new marriage, ever to be kept thereafter. For God so loved me, as I desire only to live in this world for your sake, and that I had rather live banished in any part of the earth with you, than live a sorrowful widow life without you. And so God bless you, my sweet child and wife, and grant that ye may ever be a comfort to your sweet dad and husband. My only sweet and dear child, James R. This heartfelt love letter was written by James in 1624, and a reader would initially believe it was addressed to his wife, Anna of Denmark. However, Anna died in 1619, and the letter was actually addressed to George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham, James's last and most enduring favorite. But before Villiers, there were others that made James's life a lot more colorful. Esme Stewart. While James was not the best when it comes to socializing with others, he developed a strong acquaintance with the married 37-year-old Esme Stewart, who was also the first Earl of Lennox. How strong is the bond? Well, let's just say he went as far as devoting a sonnet to Stewart. As soon as words of this little crush reached the streets, Protestant nobility was livid and despised James's delight in displaying public displays of affection with the Earl, because they don't want their king to flaunt any sign of homosexuality. People who can pull the strings started a big plan to oust the Earl from James's life. The nobility forced Esme to leave Scotland, and then imprisoned James to end any connection between the two. They even accused the Earl of seducing the young monarch and dragging him into a carnal lust. Of course, James felt terrible after one of his favorites was literally kicked out of his life. Gone are the passionate poems and intimate moments because England was not ready to have a homosexual king. But James was not ready to give up either. Despite the forced separation, James went on to have relationships with a number of male lovers. Robert Carr. In 1607, Robert Carr was made a gentleman of the bedchamber and was largely regarded as the royal favorite. It's unclear how far their romance progressed, but let's just say Carr had regular access to James, and the king was known to fondly touch Carr in public. However, it was believed that the strength of James's affection for Carr came to light when Carr became involved with Francis Howard and the Overbury incident. At this point, Carr had everything he wanted. He was made Earl of Somerset and Lord Chamberlain, and the king referred to him as his friend, whom he loved above all men living. However, despite all this, Carr was increasingly difficult and refused to sleep in the king's bedchamber. In the end, it was too much for James to forgive, and while he expressed his feelings passionately and declared that he loved Carr, he also emphasized he would not be shunned by him. This experience didn't stop the king from seeking another favorite. George Villiers. In 1614, George Villiers was introduced to James as the handsomest bodied in England. Why? Well, records revealed that his limbs were well compacted, and his conversations were so pleasing. He also has a sweet disposition that seals the deal. Not to mention Villiers' long, thin legs that are often emphasized in portraits. After Carr was removed from his post, Villiers was designated a gentleman of the bedchamber and is believed to share the night with the king at the end of 1615, when the royal court stayed at Farnham. Another piece of evidence that there was more going on behind the scene is a letter written by Villiers to James that had been a subject of controversy. In the letter, Villiers questions himself, writing, "Whether you loved me now, better than at the time which I shall never forget at Farnham, where the bed's head could not be found between the master and his dog." Okay, now that's something. While there had been turbulence in their relationship, George Villiers ascended to the dukedom quickly and managed to remain a royal favorite until James died in 1625. By this time he was close to Prince Charles, albeit there was never any indication that he had sexual contact with him. Villiers and James had long been close, and the Villiers family was inextricably linked to the royal family. But when Villiers was assassinated in 1628, his sons were placed in the royal nursery and raised alongside Charles's own children. While all of this seemingly confirms that indeed King James I was gay, we can only assume so much. We'll never know if Carr and Villiers had sexual encounters with James, but one thing is for sure: the intensity of his love for them implies something more than friendship. James's reaction to Carr's refusal to enter his bedchamber suggests a possessiveness more akin to a jilted lover than a king to his valet. What about Villiers' letter to James about the bed's head? I'm sure this is not something you would write to your friend, right? No matter how close you are. Finally, what about James's letter to Villiers, in which he mentions marriage and refers to Villiers as his wife? What about Anna and her 7 children? Perhaps James was aware of his posterity, which is why he permitted his favorites to marry and have children of their own, because he believed in the need to secure their own future. Whatever James was, he was a guy who desired affection and devotion, but he was also a king who had to perform his duty and ensure succession.